What other kind of supplements you
So
recommend?
I take a smorgasbord of different supplements, but in terms of what I recommend to most clients,
Well, we talk about what you take too.
you talked about 5-HTP. So 5-HTP is something that I've experimented with, 5-HTP and L-tyrosine, in standalone and in combination with one
I take both of
another
them.
off and on for years, right? I was on psych meds, every one you can possibly imagine in the book, up until, I don't know exactly how old I was when I got off, 22, 23.
How did you get off of them?
I cold turkeyed everything, and at the time I was on Effexor, which is one of the worst withdrawal symptoms. And I was on a high dose.
Must have been pleasant.
Dude, it was a fucking year of withdrawal symptoms, of walking around and just randomly getting this, they call them the brain zaps.
I heard about
like
that.
You feel like you're just getting electrocuted out of nowhere. Like
And
it would happen
Effexor's-
while I was driving. It was scary.
Effexor is an SSRI, right? Or is it
So
SNRI?
Effexor is an SNRI, so
Okay.
it works on both serotonin and norepinephrine.
I see.
SSNRI is how I think they word it.
I'm not sure. I think there's SSRIs and SNRIs. I'm not sure
I
if
think
there's
it
two
has.
S's or not.
I think it has. Yeah, I don't know what the acronym is, but I know it works on both serotonin and norepinephrine.
So there's a lot of people who struggle with getting off of antidepressants, regardless of whether it's an SSRI, SSNRI, and they struggle for a while, like you're saying. So do you have
It's
any
no
suggestions for them?
So in a situation like that, your neurotransmitter precursors can be hugely beneficial. In terms of researching, okay, what is it that I was taking? And here's the problem with a lot of those drugs is that most people don't know if they're on an SSRI or an SNRI.
They should know.
Or I'm on Wellbutrin and this is about dopamine, or this is, an atypical, this is a tricyclic, this is,
Right.
Most people don't, they're just like, my doctor said this is gonna make me happy. And I'm not saying, you should take this, you shouldn't take this. I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to your doctor. That's not where I'm going with this. That's not my place to say. It's an individual discussion. But for me personally, I would never go back to taking that shit. I don't care how depressed I found myself. I don't care if I'm suicidal. I would fucking never,
I don't blame you.
ever
I
go
don't
back
blame
to taking that shit, because if I really reflect on it, I don't think that it helped me.
It probably didn't.
I don't believe that it did. And I think kind of like what you
There are
talked
some
about.
people it helps, I think.
Look, there are people that it helps, and I need to make an important distinction here that when you're talking about psych medications for disorders like bipolar, particularly with like manic episodes,
Sure.
totally different story than just treating for depression alone. Or if you're talking about schizophrenia or anything involving hallucinations, delusions, anything of that sort that's a serious distortion of reality, completely separate discussion. I'm talking just depression and anxiety here. But for me, I don't think that they really helped. And kind of like you talked about with the 12-step stuff with the mindset, I believed that I needed them and I was sick. I'm depressed. I need this medication. This is my label. This is my identity. This is what I struggle with. I'm an addict. I'm sick. I can never do XYZ. I'm permanently going to have this. I am stuck in this box and it cannot change. That ideology is fucking poison, no matter what you fill the box with. Addiction, depression, like those labels are fucking poison.
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like you talk about the placebo effect, that goes in reverse too. Like, okay, if you take this pill and you genuinely believe that it's another pill that's going to help you, it's going to have the same effect. If you genuinely believe what you're told by this program, this doctor, this whatever, that you have this affliction and this is the way it affects you, that's going to manifest for you.
Right. I think everyone should do their research and due diligence on the things they take that their psychiatrist or their doctors prescribe them. I think way too many people just take whatever they're written and then don't even do much about it. They don't look into it. They don't think about it, and they just say, "Oh, the doctor said it, so it must be good." And honestly, that I wish I could tell people that's always true, but it's certainly not always true. It's like, you mean to tell me that it's good for our psychiatrist to prescribe 2 milligrams of Xanax a day, or Clozapines, or Adderall, or fill in the blank? It's like, it's not always going to be good. right? Those things can be pretty damn harmful. And I'm not saying they should never be prescribed, but long term, there's not really too many good outcomes with them, you know? And I think and part of the problem with the mental health thing is it takes a while to really kind of know yourself and understand yourself too. Like now I feel like I'm the expert on myself. So if any doctor would try to say anything to me now, I wouldn't even really believe them. The only thing I would even maybe believe is if they run like blood tests on me and they say, oh, your liver peptides are up or your enzymes are up. Okay, maybe I'll believe you then. But as far as like what is good for my mental health, I wouldn't trust a word they say. I wouldn't trust them as far as they can throw them. Because all they used to do is throw meds down my throat too. They give me antipsychotic, or they give me SSRI, or Suboxone, or fill in the blank. But the thing is, and everyone always says, sleep, diet, exercise first, right? But that's hard even too for a lot of people. Like that's just doing that first step is hard. Now people like you and me are in decent shape, so it's easier I think for people like us. But there's people who are maybe struggling with obesity, not as easy for them. Or other kinds of thyroid or hormonal issues. That's another thing. That's a whole other ball of wax.
Need it even more though, you know?
Right, and they do need it, but it's like, and then they say, it's just not always easy to treat it, but once you get to understand your body a little bit, and you know yourself a little bit, then all of a sudden you can kind of tell like what's working for you and what's not working for you. But I can't deny that does take a little while. It did take me a little while at least.
Of course.
And I had to do a lot of trial and error in there. And some of that trial and error was pretty painful. And that's where the doctors and the professionals would say, oh, well, we can't let people be doing that kind of trial and error. They'll hurt themselves. It was like, well, maybe some will, but I think the rewards and the benefits are worth it on the other side. I wouldn't trade the path that I've taken for anything. It was painful. There was a lot of shit in the road. But for how I am now, I'm glad I got here. I don't need to rely on a psychiatrist. Like everything I do, I'm able just to either buy at Vitamin Shop or GNC or online somewhere. And that's it. And most of it is just the basics. Like zinc, magnesium, B vitamins, vitamin D3, a good probiotic. And
that's what's super important.
Oh, they make a massive difference. But this is the kind of bullshit they do. You ready for this? I was listening to the radio the other day, and they were talking about how, in particular for women, that vitamin D has no effect. And they said no effect, and it can actually contribute to like cancer, or contribute to some other BS. And I'm like,
says who?
Says some study that was probably paid for by Big Pharma to get the worst possible results they could find. That's probably what it was.
Or more likely, supposedly says some study that doesn't actually says that at all, that some asshole that runs that radio show ran 3 lines of and interpreted as that and then regurgitated that nonsense.
Depending on who's paying for the study, they could try to find any sorts of things. And they can make the data look any sort of way, because who's going to question it?
Right.
Who's going to go and read the actual study to see how it was done? What was the variable? What was the control group?
Exactly. That radio dude did not do that. But somebody like you that reads studies can see through the lines a little bit more there.
I was just annoyed that I heard them smearing vitamin D, and I'm like, how can you possibly say vitamin D is going to be a bad thing? Like, and the same thing with just being in the sun in general is pretty good. I've been hearing people talk about how suntan lotion's not good for you right now, and I could believe that. It's like, because how did humans exist all of history before suntan lotion?
I just had this convo with
someone
the other day.
When did suntan lotion become a thing? The 60s?
Yeah, like what? I mean, people were just running around with horribly sunburnt skin for
like, how did they live?
Tens of thousands
how
of years.
How did they survive? But they did, though, right? And so I think there's all sorts of things they do to us in America here, and just the world in general now, that are just not necessary. And a lot of these drugs that people give, people don't understand. Most of these drugs that have been made in the laboratory, this is all new. This is less than 100 years old, most of this stuff. So this is still an experiment, right? We're still experimenting in all of this stuff. And I think back to the basics. The basics are big.
I agree very much.
Keep it with the basics.
So though you mentioned those not so much the magnesium or the individual vitamins, but for most of my clients, like I have a note file that I send them. I recommend that everybody take sugar-free Metamucil at night before bed, whether you're trying to gain weight or you're trying to lose weight. It's psyllium husk, so it's just fiber. So one, it's going to help improve your cholesterol, but two, more importantly, people don't really think about this. So I get not only weight loss, but a lot of like skinny guys and girls that are trying to gain muscle